Abracadabra. Good evening, and welcome to the Cave of Courage. I am the Zoltan. Tonight, I will tell you the terrifying story of my friend, Edward Ingot. Edward was a man who had everything. He was handsome. He was rich. He had an enormous mansion. He had an extensive collection of paintings, sculptures, and rare antiques from all over the world. Edward had a warehouse full of priceless trophies. But you see, things were not as wonderful as they seemed. Edward was a sick man. He had a disease. His fault was his consuming desire to own everything that he valued. Once Edward identified an object that he wanted, he was relentlessly driven until he owned it. There was no turning back. He could not rest until the object of his attention became his, and he would stop at nothing, and I mean nothing, until that object was his. But even after acquiring all of his prized mementos, there was still a great void in Edward's life. You see, he lived alone. His mansion was like a deserted museum. Although it was full of artifacts, there were no people to enjoy them. Soon, Edward realized that the one thing that he needed, more than anything else, was a wife, a companion with whom he could share his collection. Edward was convinced that a beautiful, intelligent woman was the only thing left that he needed to make him happy. He believed that the perfect wife would be able to complete him and cure him of his compulsion to acquire more and more expensive objects. So it was that Edward began his research and finally located a woman who seemed to fulfill all of his criteria. She was the mysterious and alluring Countess of Buda, a woman whose beauty was only exceeded by her mystery. It was said that many a man had tried, but no one was able to satisfy her conditions. Very little was known of her. Rumors, disturbing rumors, about a troubled past had been circulating for years. Some people even claimed she was a ghost or a vampire. But Edward ignored all the warnings and began to court the Countess. Of course, he knew that ghosts aren't real.
Why?
Edward, with his worldly ways and unlimited resources, was able to capture the curiosity of the Countess. Soon, they could be seen together at the most exclusive and expensive restaurants. They would attend the flamboyant parties of their rich acquaintances. The Countess was always lavishly dressed and meticulously made up. Edward felt important when he was with her. Indeed, he was exhilarated by her company. Everything seemed perfect, until the day that Edward noticed that the Countess was always wearing on her right arm a long black glove, a jet black glove that covered her hand all the way to her elbow.
Crazy.
Finally, one day, overcome with curiosity, Edward asked the Countess why she was wearing the black glove. The Countess explained that it was a dark and important secret, something that she could only reveal if and when he had gained her complete trust. Although he swore that he would never reveal her secret, no matter what it was, she would not budge. He pleaded with her and promised that he would always love her, no matter what. He begged and he begged, until finally she said,
"No, I cannot tell you until we are married."
So Edward, consumed by his sickness, married the Countess, not for love, but only to find out the truth behind her strange black glove. After an extravagant wedding, they were driven back to Edward's mansion by a horse-drawn coach. And finally, they were alone. This was the moment that Edward had been waiting for. He couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. He said to her,
"Now you must tell me, why are you always wearing that black glove?"
The Countess's eyes widened, and she looked at Edward with such a penetrating glare that he knew he was about to experience something more bizarre and more dangerous than anything he had ever known.
"Look out!"
The Countess slowly ran her hand over the black glove, then gently began to remove it. Edward stood by, as if mesmerized in a trance, and watched as the Countess revealed her unusual secret. Finally, the glove was off, and Edward could see that the Countess's arm was made entirely of cold, shiny, priceless gold. Yes, somehow, in the name of all strangeness, her arm was made of pure gold. As the days wore on, Edward couldn't help himself. His disease, his sickness overcame him. Every time they were alone, he would ask the Countess to show him the arm, and every time he saw it, the 24-karat solid gold glistened brighter than the last time. And no matter how the Countess tried to convince him that he was becoming addicted to the golden arm, Edward's desires became stronger. His disease was in full force. He had lost control of his mind. He wanted that arm. He needed that arm. So he began to plan. And he conceived a ghastly plot that was the only way to satisfy his misguided greed. Edward ordered all of the servants out of the mansion, ensuring that he would be alone with the Countess. He pretended that everything was normal, but the Countess knew that something terrible was going to happen. She looked him deep in the eyes and asked,
"You would never hurt me, would you, Edward, my love?"
Edward calmed her down, cleverly hiding his true intentions, and then, after dinner, he snuck out a large knife that he had been hiding, tiptoed up behind the Countess, and stabbed her in the back. Then he pulled her dead body onto the dining room table. He removed her black glove and sawed off her golden arm. Once detached from her body, Edward raised the golden arm in the air and admired it.
Wow!
He quickly dragged the body of the dead countess out back, where he dug a grave and dumped her lifeless corpse into it. He covered it with earth and trampled it so that nobody could tell what was there. He had already thought of the perfect alibi, and he was confident that his plan would work. No one would suspect that Edward had killed his lovely wife. Edward crept back into the house. He took the golden arm from the dining room table and he looked at it, and a shock of adrenaline surged through his veins. Of all the treasures that he had acquired, the golden arm was without parallel.
Wow!
Finally, able to think, Edward took the golden arm upstairs into his bedroom. He sat on his bed and he caressed that beautiful golden arm. It glistened. It was so shiny.
Wow!
Then he thought he heard something. It sounded like something digging a tunnel in the backyard. But no one was supposed to be home, so he listened carefully. What was that sound? What was that sound? It sounded like it was coming from the backyard. But that was impossible. Nobody was around. Then Edward heard the sound of the back door open. He thought he heard footsteps downstairs, as if someone or something had entered from the back door. Then he listened. The mansion was dead quiet, but only for a moment, because he heard it again. The sound seemed to be coming closer. It seemed to be coming up the staircase. It was definitely getting closer. It was now at the top of the stairs. Finally, he could hear the sound right outside of his bedroom door. Who's got my golden arm? Edward quickly locked the door. Overcome with fear, he jumped in his bed and hid under the covers. As he cowered and shook, Edward could sense that something, a presence of some kind, had magically passed right through the locked door. He finally realized that it was real and not his imagination. There was a presence in the room, a presence that did not belong to our world, a presence that belonged to the supernatural world. And only someone that has been in a room with a presence would know exactly how terrified Edward was. Who's got my golden arm? It was getting closer. Who's got my golden arm? And closer. Who's got my golden arm? And finally, it was right beside him. Do you?